pleasure to welcome you all back and to introduce you to our next distinguished speaker, Professor Choudhary from Northwestern University.
Good afternoon, everybody. It's a pleasure to be back here. And thanks for the invitation. So I'm going to talk about something somewhat different from what you've heard so far. This is, and it will be a little more technical in its content. And it's about, 4+ years ago, we started working with School of Medicine, surgeons, intensive care unit doctors, who are there every day trying to save lives, and life sciences team, medical school team doing research. So it's a large team, and what you see in on top, the critical care medicine. Some of these are even critical care physicians, lung transplant surgeons, and so on. And this work I'm trying to present in next 20 minutes is actually 4 years plus worth of work. I won't be able to present all of it, of my PhD student, Ellen Peltkian, who is just graduating in a month. And he's going to join one of the largest hedge funds in the world after doing this work. So the theme is how do you apply AI and in critical care? And as computer scientists, we don't think of many things that are very important in real life care. So I was asked to say a few things about myself before the talk. So over the last, some of you know me, some of you probably don't. Last 25+ years, we've been working in 3 different sort of, you can say, areas. Of course, we started out in high performance computing when I graduated, scalable computing, which sort of transformed into mining large scale data for different, and designing algorithms for large scale data, traditional data mining algorithms. And then we sort of started applying to various applications over the last 15 years, one of them being material science and design, where our group probably has 100+ in publications in material science. And the work that I'm going to talk about is in healthcare, life sciences, the companies that you saw were in the social media space and so on. And now it's, we had, with Jeffrey Fox and Tony Hay, we had written or edited a book called AI for Science. This is published just a few months before the first ChatGPT was released by OpenAI. So now, of course, this is all old stuff. Okay, so one of the things that is we tend to ignore when I shouldn't say ignore, but don't consider the importance of is the data differentiation in typical large-scale AI models that are data that is used there versus typical healthcare data. So and by the way, healthcare is a lot about time series for patients over a period of time, right? It's not like an instantaneous disease and something happens, right? So most of this will involve time series data. So typical data sets on which these big models are built are, I have a pointer here, are dense, chessboard or climate data or stock market data. It's pretty dense time series, whereas healthcare data is sparse. So if you look at this is one patient, a bunch of visits. It's hard to see here, visit 1 to 100. And these are different measurements and features and other information about the patients. And as you can see, that it is very sparse, irregular, and so on. And missing data is missing. So that's healthcare data, and it's irregular. Now, here is these are visits of different patients in the lung disease area, and there are 20 patients, and this is the data from year 2000 to approximately now. And as you can see, it's very irregular, missing, and so on. So here is, of course, this is anonymized. So here are two patients. One, the ICU patient, intensive care unit patient, where you take vitals and you have all these things hooked up to the patient, where you have vitals every 5 seconds and lab results every 6 hours, and patient on ventilators regular. And then this is a patient who has a long-term lung disease, and you can see from there are some labs in 2019, 20, and so on, CT scan here and there, and pulmonary function tests. So pretty irregular, pretty sparse, and so on. So I'm going to present a problem here. It's also a dilemma for doctors. So when patients are on ventilators, right? Doctor, every day, you have doctors making rounds of intensive care units every morning. They have to make a decision whether to take patient off the ventilator or keep the ventilator on. Very binary decision. Now, what are the challenges in that? So if you look at this particular chart, starting from day 0, the question you're asking, when is the patient ready for extubation? Okay, so the risk level is very high. That's when patient was put into the ventilator in the first place in ICU, and that starts to go down. And then, every day you're trying to make a decision whether to take patient off the ventilator or not. And there is some sort of optimal window, because if you continue to keep the patient on the ventilator, then they can develop something which can be fatal, what is called ventilator-associated pneumonia. So you are so-called between a rock and a hard place here, right? So these are the illustrative questions, and of course, you want to predict for this side and this side as well, right? Keep the patient, take the patient off or not, and will the patient develop this pneumonia? And this is not one hospital, it's everywhere, right? I mean, in healthcare setting, applies to all hospitals. Okay, so AI-enabled clinical decision making. Okay, so where does AI fit in to a certain extent? And I would say I'm using the word AI because everybody uses the word AI. I would say machine learning. So doctors are essentially limited by processing thousands of data. It's experience built into their own neural network, which is their brains. They're spotting subtle patterns over time. And there is, different doctors will have their own subjective assessments, right? Whereas AI excels at analyzing data sets, can detect complex patterns and so on. And it is providing objective analysis. It's unbiased to the extent that data that is provided is unbiased. But once the data is provided, with respect to that data, it's unbiased, right? So the idea is to complement a physician. So the problem statement, which of course, thesis problem statement, what a develop machine learning frameworks that, and I didn't talk about multimodal yet. I will towards the end. I'll say a little bit about that. Multimodal data sets across clinical context, right? So from dense ICU monitoring, very regular monitoring, to sparse specialty care, right? So, and leveraging sequential patterns to predict something. So what do we want to predict? We want to, doctors come and they want to make a decision whether to extubate or not. So every morning you get data from 12 to 8 a.m., and then that's the new data. Model is trained from older data, and then you apply, and then you make a decision. Okay, so what we want to, what is a successful extubation? If you do it too early, that means patient can go in shock, can crash, and then has to be put back on the ventilator. You don't want that. And too late, you can develop pneumonia, and of course, there are costs associated with it. So current approaches are subjective doctors' assessments, and what they do is what are called breathing trial of the patients. So now another thing that you would find interesting here is the data is small, right? So one of the challenges, at least in the US, is data is not easily shared across hospitals, okay? And its patient data is also not sort of publicly available easily. So one has to develop these from the data that is available that can be very small as well. So this is data sets of only around 450 patients and 3,000 ICU. So being able to come up with good models that are practical and usable, which became the case in this case, is very challenging as well. We are not talking about billions of data points that you have in large models, large language models. So, and the idea is that you want to align your decision making with morning rounds with actionable insights. There's a publication in Scientific Nature, Scientific Report on this work. This is the machine learning flow. And what is important here is the test on external cohort. So this is something new that I found. In order to get publications in School of Medicine or in the field of medicine, many times you have to demonstrate, particularly when you're doing work like this, on somebody else's data, right? So external validation. This was done on hospital data from Yale Hospital. Okay, another thing that as a computer scientist, many times we sort of don't think deeply about is how to deal with missing data, right? In typical flows and techniques that people follow, there's missing data, let's take average, let's do this, let's do that, impute, or extrapolate and so on. What we found, again, surprised as a computer scientist, but not to the collaborators, that missing data itself has information, right? So let's say a patient is in ICU and there is something is not recorded. That more often than not means patient is fine. Something, that thing is fine. So you preserve missing data as an important signal. So that is a preservation. Creation of meaningful ranges which are meaningful to physicians and so on. And maintain your interpretation is very important. Otherwise, doctors are not going to touch anything that comes out. So, of course, I'm not going into all the modeling and algorithm. What is very important is that with this smaller amount of data, and this took a year and a half plus of work just for this particular problem, that very, this is area under the curve, very good results in terms of accuracy, right, AUC. And as important, so this is the hospital's data at Northwestern, this is external data from Yale. That external validation was also very good. Now remember, different hospitals have different protocols, different ways of measuring things and so on. So now what is important here is that models agree with clinicians. So they have certain, they've knowledge accumulated over decades, and you have to be able to explain why is the model giving you certain type of results. And that explanation is with respect to what are the important observations of variables. So for example, motor response or RAS scores or heart rate or what, that are impacting the model's decision when it's presented. So mental status, overall stability, and so on and so forth. And they must be able to interpret the data. So they have to be able to trust the reasoning here. Now, this is another lesson in applying this machine learning to a problem like this that I at least learned, and learn in terms of how the problem is formulated. Okay, so if you think about training and building a model, you use some ground truth, right? So ground truth is historical data shows extubation was done successfully this day, right? So what you're trying to predict is exactly the model predicting extubation on the same day, right? Uh, what this so accuracy is very high, but what this shows here, so this is the extubation here, last, the white part of this. So this is -1, -2, -3. What this shows is a model predicted extubation, successful extubation before day before or 2 days before, 3 days before actually it was done, right? And that was fine. So model is actually telling the doctors that you could extubate earlier, but if you were just thinking from machine learning perspective, you will say, oh, that's an incorrect result. That's a misprediction because you're predicting only for the day on which extubation was done. And that is a very important, because from practical perspective, actually, you want extubation to be done when you're ready, which is before, need not be given by the ground truth data. Second thing that is important that came out here is model was also able to flag unsuccessful extubation, right? And that is very important because then patient can go into shock and you have to put patient back in the extubation. So now, of course, there is a whole protocol for clinical translation in this, which is being applied. And even, this is not a drug or this is not a particular procedure, but this is now going through clinical trial. I mean, if you're going to apply AI and use that to make decision, that itself becomes a clinical trial. That was something new as well for me. So at this point, I'm going to ask a question. Suppose you or your loved one is in ICU, has a ventilator. Doctor comes to you and says, "Hey, I have this machine learning model, AI model, and the model is saying I should extubate you or your loved one today, but my gut says I'll keep you on the ventilator." How many of you would say, "Okay, go with the machine learning model"?
Trust the doctor, and then he's asking right in front of you. Maybe if he didn't ask right in front of you and you didn't think he'd be disappointed at your answer.
So I always ask the audience this question. Put yourself in that situation. And if you were asked that, I mean, if doctor is going with the machine learning, all of that question becomes, it's not very interesting question, right? Question is if there is a sort of debate, or should I not? I have not still had a single hand raised for that question where I say, okay, use AI or the model, which is actually surprising. Yeah. Now, this is the other side of the coin, which is also same models, same data. Now you're trying to go to the other side of the curve and trying to predict ventilator-associated pneumonia. Now, the problem there is that you want to predict if pneumonia is going to happen and then take the appropriate treatment, do the appropriate treatment. And till today, treatment is uniform across. It's the same, take Tylenol, I'm just, ibuprofen, or just is the same for everybody, right? Whereas models were able to sort of influence towards the personalized medicine part, right? You can do different treatments for different patients in order to treat or avoid ventilator-associated pneumonia. Same problem, and I'm not going to go through this complex these clusters, but what is important thing is, so this is somewhat simplified here, is these are different VAP patients, and that's the case for personalized medicine. if you take these different vitals or measurements and other things of patients, if you look 5 days before to day 0, that these are all the same VAP patients, but the feature, these are blue turning to red, low value to high value, and these are red turning into blue, and so on and so forth, right? So all these things are different, but all of them develop VAP. So, and these observations or these measurements determine the type of medicine, personalized medicine that should be applied. So that is also very interesting outcome and results of the same data sets and models. And again, VAP within 3 days, VAP within 5, so you have to predict, will develop in 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, and so on. And these types of results have never been seen before in this context, the accuracy and so on and so forth. And again, the important thing that doctors see is what is influencing the outcome or the results of the model, right? So the VAP probability here, so these are high means VAP and low means no VAP, and what is determining that prediction? And does it jive with their historical understanding, observation, and so on? So that explanation and trust, again, becomes important. And one must be able to find these things. And, you take deep neural networks and black boxes and all those things don't work here. Okay, so the third problem of the same, so we are talking about lung disease, right? We talked about ventilation, ventilated patients in intensive care, 2 problems. Now, this is another lung disease problem which happens over many, many years, right? And that is called interstitial lung disease due to systematic sclerosis. Hard to pronounce, at least for me. Now, what is the problem here? Over many, many years, patients can develop this disease, and typically it results in death, lung transplant, and so on and so forth, right? So what happens today is that you have inflammation in lungs, right? And at this point, when the inflammation, that's when it's observed by physician. And many times it's too late, right, that observation, because now you already have this. So observation or the diagnosis is done here, right? Now, we have data over a long period of time about these patients. So the question is, can you use that data, historical data and the time series data in much before to predict the onset of this disease, right? Because that can help a lot, right? So the problem formulation here is using the data. So what is this data? EHR, electronic health records, there is imaging data, there is a single cell data, etc. Available. So can you use machine learning, deep learning, and all to predict this disease, onset of disease and mortality, and so on and so forth. So now there are practical challenges, right? At least in the US, one requires imaging, CT scans and so on. But normally when you go to the hospital for your regular checkups, you don't do CT scans, it's expensive, right? So that means over a period of time, CT scans may not exist, right? So now one of the challenges, or one of the good outcomes, I should say, not challenges, of this work has been that hospitals have started to take, at least where this has influenced, regular CT scan, because the value of that in prediction. And the challenge, of course, is who's going to pay for it, because insurance companies only pay when something happens. They don't pay, I might, predict and therefore they're not. So there are all these practical challenges that we as computer scientists and doing machine learning don't think about, right? So all those things have to be influenced. Anyway, so why imaging matters? So now the question is, how do you find if that disease exists? Is by imaging, by observation. And it's too late. Once you observe, it's too, it can be too late. And we want to use other information in EHR and so on in order to predict. And if you have regular imaging, then now you have imaging of before and after disease, so now you can build models. And that's where that thing that I described earlier comes. So one can do direct disease visualization, progression, and subtle early changes, right? And these are the data sets where first ILD CT, that patient already had ILD, so CT scan, and then this was a patient without ILD, okay? So can AI find signs? Okay. So here are the examples of imaging, right? So same disease, different outcomes, different patterns, right? So here is a one patient which has stable scans over years, right? CT scan. Here you see gradual progression, this stuff here, over a decade. So these are data over 30 years. And this is rapid decline. So here you can see the scars, here, right? So now you have this rich CT scan data. So it's an opportunity to do multimodal AI models to see if one can predict onset of disease, mortality, et cetera, et cetera. So these patients exhibit highly variable disease progression patterns, where some remain stable for a while others do not, right? So that is another challenge here, right? Disease exists, but patients exhibit different. So this is called forced vital capacity. It's basically a breathing test. So there are 4 clusters, right? So this cluster has high values, this mid values, low values, and so on, but all of them have ILD, right? But at different percentage. Whereas mortality for these guys is low, right? So there are a lot of other challenges. It's not like a uniform data set. Now, another challenge is the formulation of the problem, where the question one must ask is, hey, if you take a CT scan today and you see the disease, and let's say previous CT scan was 5 years ago and you didn't see the disease, what happened in those 5 years? When did the disease really start? When do you say in a time series data that when did the disease start? And that's another case for regular CT scan. So this believe it or not, the formulation of the problem that I'm showing here itself took 2 to 3 months. How do you formulate this problem? So there were 3 major prediction tasks. Detection of ILD itself, right? Mortality, is patient going to survive for 5 years, 3 years, 1 year? And the patient with ILD survive for 5 years, 3 years, 1 year, and so on, right? So these are the these are the CT scan with ILD and the previous one, so there can be unknown period there, right? So you have to account for that. And surprisingly, with this formulation, results were again quite good. I won't go through this thing, but as importantly, again, trust is important. Doctors, physicians have to say, okay, model is saying because of this, I'm saying giving this prediction, and that is okay. It should be okay with them. So so models were able to provide the right answers to the doctors. But what is another interesting thing is that this was totally unknown. Surprising discoveries, right? So nobody bothered with red cells before, or serum chloride, or white blood cell pattern in this historically, right? So now there are new biomarkers that can be used in EHR data in order to predict as well as do as well as provide care. So, of course, as part of the PhD thesis, there is more work. This is one slide which is where we built models, and I'm not presenting results from this, using mixture of experts, right? So now you have lungs, and now you have different parts of the lungs. So now can you use vision models, transformers, vision transformers, combined with electronic healthcare records and so on, to improve upon prediction and care, right? So all this work, hopefully next time I'll be able to talk about. And so the problems that have been addressed is, I talked about these two and a little bit of this. These two I did not talk about, but this progression of this work has started with a small problem of, shouldn't call it small problem, but specific problem of should you extubate or not, down to long-term care for patients. With that, I'm going to say thank you, and thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much.